Are we addicted to things that subtract from our lives? Subtraction meaning things like time with your family, time with your spouse and or loved ones. Are we addicted to work, spending too much time at work? So addicted to things that subtract from our lives. First, I got to say God is God all the time. And all the time, God is God. I must say that because God is God over my life. He reigns over my life. And the addictions and things that I've been delivered from is the reason why I do this Godcast. I will be talking about the differences between drug use, drug abuse, and drug dependency. Also, about the psychological aspects and the physiological aspects of drug use, drug abuse, and drug dependency. Talk about detoxification and withdrawal from addictions as well. Most drugs of abuse include both psychological and physical, which is drugs. Addictions consists of both. Now, physiological addiction is when you are basically just physically addicted to a chemical substance, while psychological addiction is when you are mentally addicted to a chemical substance. It's all in your mind. It's a psychological thing with the dopamine and stuff like that going on in your brain, the reward system. Referring to drug abuse, not just any kind of dopamine rushes and rewards. We can be psychologically addicted to anything. You could be addicted to your job. You could be addicted to your spouse. You could be addicted to sex. You could be addicted to anything. Phase 1 is called the release stage. This is where people are in the experimental process, just using drugs for things like escaping negative feelings, by using drugs to escape loneliness, tension, boredom, anxiety, fatigue, anger, and to escape or get relief from many other things. The next phase is called the increased use phase, phase 2. This is taking and using more or larger doses or quantities of the drug or drugs. The third phase is called the preoccupation phase. This is where you always have a supply of the drug and or continuous concern for the drug. That is perceived as normal behavior in the user's mind. This is a normal thing. It's perceived as a normal behavior, perceived. They think it's normal to chase after these drugs as such. Next phase is called the dependency phase. The dependency phase is where more of the drug is being sought after without regard for the negative presence and without regard of the presence of negative physical symptoms such as congested coughing and or shortness of breath in cases of cigarette or marijuana addiction, blackouts from alcohol abuse, and moderate to excessive soreness and inflammation of nasal passages from snorting drugs like cocaine, crystal meth, fentanyl, and other drugs. People crush up prescription drugs and snort that. They crush up whatever kind of drug they want to get high on and snort it. This is damaging nasal passages. The next phase, the addiction phase. The addiction phase is a more severe form of the dependency phase with intense physical and or mental dependency escalating to addiction. And last, about the phases of addiction, this would be the withdrawal phase, which is a physical and mental effect, or this is physical and mental effects, I should say plural, from not using the drug. This involves symptoms like itching, chills, tension, stomach pain, or depression from not using the addictive drug, or an entire set of psychological concerns, mainly impossible to satisfy cravings from the drug. Everyone and anyone can be addicted to something psychologically and behaviorally. We don't want it to be something that is subtracting beneficial things from our lives because of the negative impact it has in the long run. Drug use is the use of a chemical substance, mostly identified with things like recreational use and or experimental use, or like I mentioned in phase 1 of the phases of addiction, being the relief phase. Things I mentioned in that phase also applies to just using drugs. With most drugs, the user is at risk of moving from occasional use to regular use or from moderate to heavy use, and then to chronic use or persistent use. Next is drug abuse. Drug abuse is the willful misuse of either illicit or licit drugs for perceived necessity, for recreation, or convenience. This is perceived. This is in your mind. You're abusing the drug, but this is how you look at it. These are necessities. This is recreation. This is fun. But you're using more of the drugs. You're abusing the drugs. You're misusing the drugs. Now, licit drugs, as I mentioned before, licit drugs are legal drugs, and illicit drugs are basically just illegal drugs. Now, drug abuse differs from drug use in that drug use is taking or using drugs. That's the use, whereas drug abuse is more intense and often misuse of drugs, often to the point of addiction. Drug dependence is a close relation to addiction. Keep in mind, they go parallel to each other, side by side. You have to have the dependence to be addicted. And both physical and psychological factors cause drug dependence. Again, psychological dependence is being mentally dependent or mental dependence to the drug. This is being a state of mind. This is being in a state of mind, a strong state of mind, mentally, psychologically addicted to drugs like cocaine, meth, methamphetamine, or crystal meth, cigarettes, psychologically, and some things are psychological and physical. These can be some of the hardest ones to actually quit and or kick the habit into that. Physical dependence is the need to continue taking the drug to avoid withdrawal symptoms that often include feelings of discomfort and illness. Withdrawal symptoms of any drug ain't no joke. One of the worst ones would be addiction to opioids. Opioid addiction, the worst detoxification, which I'll talk later on. So, with repeated use, there is a tendency to become dependent and addicted to most drugs. Drug dependence kind of covers drug addiction, but it's more intense. As I was talking about, the withdrawal symptoms sometimes can be excruciating. Everyone and anyone can become addicted to something or have an addiction. And yes, we can be addicted to anything. Right now, I'm addicted to Jesus. I'm addicted to the Lord. I would discuss that kind of addiction, like behaviorals and psychologicals, how we can have uncontrollable urges to anything. I got to tell you, drugs are an equal opportunity affliction. It's in the mind that you cannot stop. You feel this craving. You feel this urge. It's a feeling. A compulsive use of a substance that harms a person's health, relationships, school, or work performance. It harms any productive work in your life. Any productive work. That's where it subtracts. Because if it's taking away what you're producing, using subtract. So we are addicted to subtraction. It is a chronic disease characterized by compulsive or uncontrollable drug seeking and use of drugs, despite the harmful consequences and changes in the brain, which can be long or lasting changes and addiction. Drug addiction involves non-casual or non-recreational drug use. A frequent symptom is intense psychological preoccupation with obtaining and consuming drugs. And in some cases, abuse of drugs by some people may represent an attempt to relieve underlying psychiatric disorders. You can have other kind of issues going on, emotionally, mentally, and all these different things. And you could be addicted to something to relieve that, to get rid of that. So an attempt to relieve underlying psychiatric disorders. Now, also, people who perceive themselves as drug users are more likely to develop serious drug abuse problems. You're more likely to develop an abuse situation. Addiction is an equal opportunity affliction to bondage, to the bondage of drugs and to the subtraction of you. Physically, mentally, financially, emotionally, it just keeps on subtracting. It just keeps taking away and taking a bondage. I should say a bondage is attached to addiction. God is God all the time. I love you people. Please give me a like, subscribe, and share it. I want to say, peace be with you. Much love to you. And may God do exceedingly, abundantly, above all you can think, above all you can think and or ask. Be blessed exceedingly, abundantly, above all, according to God. God is God all the time, and all the time, God is God. God bless you. I love you. Peace.